All right, that was maybe the craziest chapter. As far as an opening chapter to a book is concerned, I can't believe how much we got out of that. Now, if I was going to go through scene by scene, it would just be 2 or 3 hours. Like, it's just way too much. But I think I can get some of the main points, and there are some main points for sure that I think really foreshadow where this is going, and I'm all here for it. Now, it starts with this epigraph for chapter 1 that I want to read. That I think will sum up in some ways where this is going. Two forces, once in vicious opposition, and I'm thinking of the Edur and the Lethri here, but there's probably a lot more going on to this, now found themselves virtual bedmates, although neither could decide which of them had their legs pried open first, which is a pretty, yeah. The simple facts are these. The original hierarchical structure of the Tist-Edur tribes proved well suited to the Lethri system of power through wealth. The Edur became the crown, settling easily upon the bloated gluttony of Lether. But does a crown possess will? Does the wearer buckle beneath its burden? Another truth is now, in hindsight, self-evident. As seamless as this merging seemed to be, a more subtle, far deadlier conjoining occurred below the surface, that of the specific flaws within each system, and this blending was to prove the most volatile brew. So we have the sometimes brutal ways of doing things of the Tist-Edur and the strength, and we have the gluttony of the Lethri. And in this first chapter, we can see that they are kind of now working together. We have Rulad at the helm, and we would think, well, it sounds like the Edur have taken over the Lethri, but in some ways, the elite Lethri are getting even more rich and more gluttonous, and it's just a very interesting thing. But obviously, we have this issue that they are starting to see that they are hemorrhaging coin, and it sounds like the stuff from Midnight Ties, that Tehol, and those three ladies were involved in causing an economic crisis is starting to work. But yeah, it's interesting because these two forces, both sides think that they are the ones who really came to power in all this. Remember, the Edur were kind of stopping them from going onto those lands. But if the Edur have the emperor, and now they aren't in the way, now they can expand the way they would like and take over that whole continent. Sort of. Something like that. Anyway, we start with, and that motif or whatever it is found, that idea of the two opposing forces is found in basically all of these scenes, especially the ones involving fear and Siltius ruin, as well as maybe the funniest scene in all of these, in all the series so far, at least for me, with Bug and Tehol at the end. It was hilarious. Okay, so we start with this Tanel Yathvaner, and he is what, the assistant to this Karos Invictad guy, and it's very interesting that it starts with this puzzle with the onyx stones, and they have all these rings and things, and it's just a puzzle where you're supposed to do a bunch of moves, and then it all comes apart. And again, I'm just thinking of curled Emerlane shattering, and it sounds like there is certainly some foreshadowing for this kingdom or empire to also come apart. But when Karos, as this Lethari, who is second in command to Rulad, maybe he, it seems like it's implied that he knows what will eventually need to be done because he's very quick this way or something. I don't know. Very interesting, though. And also, there's this line here that says, and the challenge is to slide the pins onto into a configuration to create a sudden collapse. Very important. So they are brought before this group of prisoners. There's a row of them. A lot of them have just totally collapsed. These are Lethari. These are Lethari under the Edur, both the prisoners here and this Invigilator. Is that what his name was? Or his title was? Yeah, the Invigilator. And it's very, very, very interesting to see this dynamic in place, because he also will wonder if this Tist Edur liaison, Bruthen, really has to be here, or if that's just their way of showing their presence and showing that really you work for me and don't forget it. So who knows? It's interesting. They question all these people, and we find out that a lot of them are destined for these egregious, for these drownings. Remember, they would have to swim across, and now they are just being weighted so down that that they are, most of them are just drowning, and it's making the bookmakers of Lethari angry because nobody's making it across. Okay, so we have one little thing that shows some of Karos's his way of doing things, or his way of thinking, I guess. Karos Invictad's perfect laws of compulsion and control. Take any segment of population, impose strict yet clear definitions on their particular characteristics, then target them for compliance. Bribe the weak to expose the strong, kill the strong, and the rest are yours. Move on to the next segment. And we have seen this sort of thing happen in many ages of our human history, where in order to kind of get control over the population, try to weed out the wheat. I'm thinking of the Soviet Union, and how people would just disappear. A lot of these would be academics. Think of Russia in the 70s, or sorry, China in the 70s. Think of there's things like that go on now in some places where these academics and people who would speak out. Think of in Rome and Greece. Think of Socrates being charged for corrupting the youth. There were all these poets and things in ancient Rome also who were charged with this and either executed or exiled because it threatened the control that the leadership had. So it's very interesting. Okay, so we see that he is the most powerful man in the kingdom, or the empire, next to the emperor. But even as people look at the emperor, later on it'll say, well, does he really think he won the war? Does he really think he's in charge? So it's interesting to see that dynamic, because in Midnight Tides, I had no idea who was going to end up winning in this exchange between the Lethari and the Edur. So it's neat to see that is still ongoing. And it seems like the culture of the Lethery seems to be bleeding in a little bit with some of the culture of the Edur, and maybe vice versa. Or that's just my take on it. Anyway, this Carlos guy who got the puzzle from Tanos, or is that his name? That's not right. Tanel, did this puzzle in like 2 seconds, and it was just done. Okay, so, and after all of that, after seeing these people, many of them well connected to nobles, many of them academics, dying. After that, what he has to ask about is the percentage of interest in an inn. So how are my earnings going? Very Lethery of him. Okay, I want to skip ahead a little bit. I don't want to go through each of these things, but I do have to talk about these patriotists, and I will talk about them again later. But these patriotists are this secret police established, and they are the only ones able to bear arms, or allowed to bear arms. They have their belt, they have their sword, and they have their dagger. And it's interesting to see what they can do to push their power. And also, we have this Liberty consign, who Rautos, another person who I'm very intrigued by, he is part of this. He's the head of the family that has been established in the Lethery kingdom or whatever for centuries. His family has. And they have formed this Liberty Consign, which is an association between all the wealthiest families of Lether. Something that they couldn't have imagined they would have happened, but they are working together to, it sounds like, to protect their wealth and things like that. Former enemies, really, and they are trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And I think, this is T-Hole and Bug and these three ladies. So, we have him doing this interesting thing. He is supposed to be figuring out that stuff, but instead, he has been working on, he's looking into the ledgers to find evidence of past flooding. Has this ever happened? Because it sounds like he's trying to figure out if this is, is this natural, what's going on? All these places are flooding, and people are going to go bankrupt and lose their homes and lose their shops. Yeah, and so that's what he's dealing with. And this place that has been established, he has this beautiful, what do you call it? Place, which is, the estate, I guess. And you can see that the wooden posts have started to rot, which is just a way, it parallels the Lethery system in a way where it seems like everything, even people established for centuries, even their great estates are starting to rot. But he's so interested in these objects that they have been excavating from this rot and from this work. Some of them, they are bronze and copper. There's this bronze one with the flange that was clearly visible, long and roundish, bent at right angles. An incisions formed a crosshatched pattern about the elbow. They can see that it's a tool on its own. It's not supposed to be attached to anything. There's a copper sheet. There's a copper circular sheet. It has these holes punched in it really perfectly. You can't tell which way it's going because the holes are just perfectly drilled out without it punching through, leaving that whatever you would call it on the other side when you're woodworking or doing that sort of thing. I guess it's maybe like the stars or something, and they're just trying to figure out what's going on. And I want to know what's going on. So he's looking out. Also, he sees a flag of the Esterict family, which also looked damaged, possibly by fire. And he says, I wonder what lies beneath those stones. It's just so much intrigue. So much intrigue. Now, we get to the Aldan camp. And this Atriprida, who also has an Edur with her, I believe, she has been doing this crazy thing, which again is this cleansing going on. And they are systematically going around and trying to take away the flocks of these people, which is, the core of their economy. Without that, they can't flourish. They are also going around attacking these tribes, and it's so parallels things like, think of Julius Caesar out fighting the Gauls, and Julius Caesar had his own scribes with him writing about his exploits and things, and even it sounds like he's kind of dictating this. And the official record that is going home is that the Gauls they had lots of dealings with the Gauls, but I believe it was the Gauls. This is Vercingetorix, saying that they are coming together, all these different tribes, and they are a threat to Rome. And so this is why we must go to war with the Gauls. And we are seeing that in this book as well, and it's making this news is coming back. That's the official word, and it has the commoners just so excited and happy to hear word that they are gloriously winning this war out in the west. But I think this one is a war out in the east, and everyone's afraid of these Aldan, who they believe all these different groups of them have come together, but really they haven't. So they're just slaughtering people. And this Edur, who is supposed to be kind of supervising, is seeing this and going, oh, this is nasty stuff. But so they have this brutal, they kill all the women and the children, and they scatter these flocks and destroy these dogs, and it's awful, super awful. Now, let me make sure. Yeah, and as they do that, this is just making more way for the roads, for them to make more roads and make more outposts and expand further. And if the Edur would have still been established on this land, it certainly would have, or if they would have been a hindrance, it would have made that expansion a little trickier. Even though this expansion into this Aldan territory had happened beforehand. But isn't it interesting to see how we see those parallels? Now, I'm never going to get through this unless I pick it up. But that's the official word. And really the unofficial thing that there's no alliance, but they are still having a clash with an unknown group. And that seems like it's probably this unknown group that came up on the canoes. And there was only 700 of them in this last battle against 6,000 of the Lethari, and they killed 3,000. So there is concern out there, but it sounds like this common folk, or the commoners, the official report coming back is that probably, probably not telling them about these people that are actually out there kicking their butt at times. Now, very, very cool. After this, you can see overhead the first carrion birds. And again, we're seeing that a lot in this series, that sort of thing. Okay, and then we have this scene where Siltius Ruin comes across 6 Edur warriors, as well as 10 Lethery warriors and a whole bunch of slaves, and they are transporting a bunch of weapons and a bunch of gold. We don't know what the purpose is there, but 2 of the slaves that have been captured are Udinus and Kettle. And Kettle has been anyway, they Siltius, this albino Tistandi, is going to kick their butt. He's offering them gold to get the 2 back, I think, but they basically say, or no, he says he isn't offering them gold. That's why it's so cool. He's saying, you have a couple people of mine and I want them back. And they say, well, you're going to have to bargain because we earned these people. If you didn't tie them up at night and they ran, that's on you. He says, no, I'm going to take them and I'm not going to pay you anything. And then they have this. He slays all of them. Udinus kind of gets the chain during this melee and chokes out one of the Lethery dudes. And we find out that that's the one who has been raping Kettle, poor Kettle, and the other ones, the other Lethery would just these warriors would just laugh. And now all these Edur are dead. The warriors, these Lethery warriors, have split, and Siltius Ruin is out chasing after him because of that, and he is super cold. And I wonder. Oh, and he has a name for himself. He's already a legend on this island. He's the White Crow. So cool. And one of the things that I'm waiting for, I suppose, is, especially after the prologue, with Kilmandaros talking to Animander Rake, I'm waiting for those 2 brothers to meet again and seeing how that's going to go. I hope it doesn't turn into another sibling killing sibling sort of thing. But wow. And so, I mean, Udinus is ticked off. He is cold as ice right now, but he's doing that for Kettle. And it's an amazing moment right here where Fear doesn't want to come to terms with following Siltius Ruin, this Tistandi. And so Fear now has the perfect name for himself right now. He is being hunted and targeted. And not only that, he is following the guy who all the Edur call the Betrayer. So what an amazing thing going on. And I wonder, are these guys going to be, I mean, they're considered bandits basically right now. And are they going to be the ones that kind of defend things in the end? We have Udinus, and he has this Wyval, or he had this Wyval thing as a part of him. And so it's interesting to see that dragon connection again. But anyway, I don't want to ramble, and this isn't even me going through all the different things that we could go on with everything here. But Udinus is feeling just fine killing his own people if they do something like that, and Kettle hates them for doing what they did, and she kind of asks, is it wrong that I'm happy that we are just destroying them? I still want to tear out their throats, Saren. Is it that bad? I think it must be. And then they are interrupted, and that's supposed to make us kind of consider that. Okay. Isn't it interesting that now we have this emperor of this kind of joined union between these two groups, and now we have this Edur emperor whose very skin is this symbol of the Lethery. I just find that amazingly interesting, this duality of natures that would be opposing one another. Very, very, very interesting. Okay. Let's see. I don't need to go through all of that. If you have read it, you've read it. But, man, Saren and Kettle, she tells Kettle, there will be scars. There will be scars, Kettle. And I'm sure she's meaning the physical scars, but probably also talking about the scars unseen. Kettle says that being alive is hard. She's always hungry, feeling hurt. Always feeling small. She felt really small while that was happening and people were laughing. It's just awful. It's just awful. Holy smokes, guys. I just circled so much. It's too much to like I can't go through all of this with each of this page. At the top of this page, I wrote incredible page. That is 62, by the way. Just so much being talked about in this. Okay. Silch's room comes back. He has dealt with the enemy. And yeah, it's amazing to see Fear, who is not going to follow his brother anymore. We see that even though they are being hunted, it's quite sparse. I mean, these hunting parties are quite sparse. But they know that perhaps, those firstborn sons that Hannah and Mosag had, I believe they are working on these traps, that they've laid these traps around the city, which is interesting, which seems more like keeping people out. I mean, it could be keeping people in, but keeping people out. And also they have these traps along the east on the border of the Aldan. And those ones make sense to the commoners and people, or it makes sense that they would have those. But yeah, it seems like maybe even Rulad is afraid of Fear. Now, this duality of natures, where we don't know who's really in charge, it seems like they both feel like they are in charge, but really there's this other thing that's really in charge, and that it's probably the crippled god, who in the end just needs some chaos, and they are all under the thumb of the crippled god. Anyway, we get word about, we hear about the Patriotists a little bit more, and they practically worship this Garen Eberict who had immunity. And he cleansed, there's that word again, he cleansed the streets. And Stephen Erickson makes this interesting, getting into the mind of this Tanal, who is a part of this group. This Tanal's a terrible dude, by the way. And you know that. Okay. So, yeah, he's a part of this group, and he makes up he says this interesting thing about Garen Eberict, and he calls him a noble killer. He says he'd murdered thousands, thieves, thugs, and wastrels, the depraved and the destitute. He had cleaned the streets of Letherus, And who had not indulged in the rewards? Fewer beggars, fewer pickpockets, fewer homeless, and all the other decrepit failures of the modern age. Tannel admired Jaron Ebericht. He had been a great man, murdered by a thug, his skull crushed to a pulp. Wasn't it Mayan that killed this guy? Anyway, he's saying, hey, he did the hard work that none of us wanted to do by killing off the thugs and the criminals and the homeless. And which of these people could say that they didn't benefit from that? They cleansed the street, but at what awful cost? Just getting into the mind where they're saying he did this ultimate good. And now it's like it's been spread. Instead of, think of a fire, and Jaron Ebericht is the fire. It's like they've stamped out the fire finally, the people that would be against him, and then it's just spread to more people who will probably get this same type of immunity. And it's just spreading. It's just spreading. That same sort of thing. And it's in what this Atraprida is doing, just this cold, awful thing, which as long as it benefits the Lethery people, then doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what we do. Seems like that's kind of their way of thinking, and it just reminds me of Rome like crazy. Okay. But we have this meeting between Rautos, who is the one who is interested in this copper stuff. We have him meeting with this Tannel, who has taken advantage and raped one of these women who are condemned to the drowning. So he thinks, well, no one's going to care. She's just going to die anyway. Which, awful dude. Awful dude. Every once in a while, Steven Erikson will throw one of these types. And so he is going to meet with Rautos. These two are meeting, as well as, what is the main guy's name? That's the boss. Shoot. The other guy. And they want to know what's going on with this hemorrhaging of coin. Rautos has some ideas, thinks it's probably a thief. The shortage of coin is finally becoming noticeable to this highest kind of assembly of families, but they want this Tanos guy and Karos. They want to have this. They want to kind of investigate. Remember, this is kind of the secret police in Lethery, and they are going to quietly investigate in a way that doesn't startle the common folk and make everyone think that the economy is just about to collapse. And also, it's very interesting how Rautos is going to mention how he's been getting complaints because of some of the people who have been brought in by this secret police condemned to drowning. And it seems like sometimes it seems like they're just matching quotas by doing this. And he has been getting complaints as this head of this high-ranking, this assembly of high-ranking families. So he's getting complaints that even though these people are not from those families that are getting taken, they are well-connected and sometimes friends. And so one of these people, who this Tanos guy thought was going to be condemned, is doing this awful stuff, has had her, she was beaten off like horrifically. And then after that, that's where he is doing his depraved sexual kind of exploits here. And it's just Bidethal levels of awful. And then this Karos guy, who's his boss, says, "You know what? You are going to let this person go. You are going to clean her record and let her go back," which makes you think, holy smokes, she is going to have it out for that guy, and he better look over his shoulder. But even though he follows this Karos guy, he feels like eventually he's going to kind of, there's just plots and plots and plots, and these little triangles of who's really in charge and who's going to come out on top and things like that. And he was the first name in chapter 1, so I'm going to keep an eye out on him. And this triangle of Karos, Tanal, and Rautos, who's going to kill who in that situation. But it's eventually going to happen for sure. And he basically says 3 words when he's told to let this woman go. He says, if she remembers all this and what is done with her, he better look out. It's just awful. Okay, and then we have maybe the funniest freaking scene that starts on the bottom of page 69. It's the last scene. It's Tehol and Bug. And this banter that was already funny in Midnight Tides just gets to a new level of funny after we have that connection that Bug is this elder god. It's just hilarious. They have this insect that Tehol is trying to balance on its body, but really they're used to balancing on each of its legs, and it so perfectly is a cap of the themes that we have gotten so far. It's just not meant for that, and he's trying to find this perfect balance. "You're torturing him," said Bug. "It only seems that way." "No, it is that way." "How goes the construction business? Sinking fast." And he's going to tell Bug to keep amassing debt, keep taking on creditors, and or keep getting credit or whatever. I'm an idiot. So sorry with my explanations being so poor sometimes. Okay. And they wonder how this two-headed insect, which it sounds like that's the Edur and the Lethri people kingdom, just in a bug almost. What's going to happen? And Bug wonders how much does this insect eat in a lifetime, or something like that. And he says the equivalent of a drowned cat. That's what Tehol says. He says, how would you know even how much a drowned cat weighs? And he makes reference to this feral cat who had raped a flightless ornamental duck, and it was sentenced to drowning. And it was the yowl heard across the city, this terrible demise. And then somebody bought that drowned cat. Sounds like it was Tehol. And the reason he bought it is because he always wanted to use that reference, it sounds like, of it weighs as much of a drowned cat, but he didn't want to be off on... He didn't want to have that... didn't want to be off on his estimation of what that would be. So he... So he bought a drowned cat, just so he could be precise. Okay. And then we have the very end here. Tehol wants Bug to create a wooden box. And then there's this, it sounds like an Abbott and Costello routine with wood, WOOD, and then WOULD. That kind of wordplay going out. And then he's not being specific about what he wants, but he wants this. He wants this to be made for him. And Bug doesn't know why, but he's going to do it. He wants him to keep amassing debt. Can I at least ask what this box is for? Tehol settled back on his bed, studied the blue sky overhead for a moment, then smiled over at his manservant, who had just happened to be an elder god. Why, comeuppance, Bug. What else? It's just amazing, and it ends there. That was an amazing chapter. I hope this was interesting. This was a lot to talk about. I won't do this for each of these chapters. I certainly do this in the first chapters where I'm discovering some of the themes, but then I will be going on for the ride a little bit more, and I will be trying to make them much more concise. But these first chapters always are quite big, and that is just kind of how it goes. But that's just amazing, and I am so excited to see where this continues. I'm going to be going through this quite slow to make sure I really savor all these plot lines. As I went through Memories of Ice and House of Chains, I feel like if I didn't know who somebody was exactly or where things were going, I wanted to make those connections, so I really followed those pathways correctly. And there were some pathways in the Bone Hunters, which, with how fast I was going, that I just wasn't giving them their full attention. So I want to do that again with this one. I want to really pay attention to this Rautos's pathway and this Tanel and what happens with this group that I didn't even think was going to be that interesting at the end of Midnight Tides. But why wouldn't Silchus Ruin be seeing Silchus Ruin do all this stuff? This Tist Andi, who was there. He was there at this battle with the Kachane Shamal ages ago. He was there. He was the one betrayed, and now he's back. A lot has changed with Animander Rake since then. He's become much more soft, I feel, in some ways. I mean, still just ice cold. But now we have this. We have his brother. And if all we get is just this storyline of where that goes with his brother, I'm here for that. But it sounds like we're getting all sorts of different mysteries and things. The intrigue about what's happening underneath this building. Yeah, it's just amazing. Just amazing. And I'll talk to you on the next one.